Hey 3DMJers, this is Jeff Alberts, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. As of this month, we now have 29 free videos over at 3dmjvault.com. The Vault is our video-based online education platform, and it continues to grow every single month. There are instructional videos on posing, hypertrophy, fat loss, peak week, spine health, post-contest recovery, and a whole lot more. Again, all that is over at 3dmjvault.com. Thanks so much for tuning in and enjoy the show.
This is Andrea Valdez, and today I'm talking to Eric Helms and Brad Loomis all about maintenance calories. A lot of us at one time thought it was this super secret thing that was going to fix all of our body composition worries as soon as we could correctly find it. But since then, we've learned that this is actually not the case, and that there's no formula or calculation that can give us this level of clarity that we all hoped for. But that said, why is this number so important to us? Why do we consider it at all? Why do we use it in our coaching practice? And why do we base a lot of our decision-making criteria on it? Those are the types of things that we'll be discussing in this episode once Eric stops distracting us with his pineapple at the beginning of the show. You'll see what I'm talking about. Anyways, as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, go to 3dmusclejourney.com or to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/team3dmj, and leave it under podcast number 88. Let's get into it. Please enjoy this talk all about maintenance calories with Brad Loomis and Eric Helms. Here we go. We're starting this podcast. I'm here with Brad and Eric and a pineapple. If you're not... If you're not,
that you make a pineapple.
If you're only listening to this, it's a team tradition, really, that every time we're on Skype together, one or all of us is eating. At meetings, it's all of us, pretty much. And then Eric is the only jerk who decides to do it. Eric's the only one who likes to do it during podcasts.
You know, it's a time zone issue, because we were always podcasting when it's lunchtime for me, and I can't not have my MPS stimulated while I talk. So.
Yeah, that's true. And as it's stated in the muscle and strength pyramids, nutrient timing is the first priority.
Correct.
And
do as I say, not as I do.
It cannot be manipulated. If he misses lunch, he will be 120 pounds tomorrow.
Yeah, last time you saw me and you thought, oh, he looks a little small. You know what happened? Didn't eat a pineapple during a podcast.
Yeah.
Skipped lunch.
That's what happened. So really for Eric's athletic career, we have to endure the pineapple cutting and eating.
That's right.
Yeah, it's important.
Because if we didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to, in 5 years, place 15th in the Masters representing New Zealand at IPF Worlds. This is critical.
Yeah, this is a good intro. So
Aaron chopping up a pineapple as opposed to the wrapper crinklings of the protein bar.
This is true.
I'm thinking about you guys.
Much preferred.
It's true. He usually gets in trouble.
Those wrapper crinklings are just the loudest thing on earth, I swear.
It's the Quest bars. They do it on purpose, I think, so that everyone around you sees you opening it and then looks and is like, what do you have there? A Quest.
It's a marketing tactic.
Yeah, that's what it is. Except for podcasts, it's
special loud rappers. Not to be confused with rap artists who yell.
Rap artists, loud rap artists, yes.
Do we know any quiet rap artists? We'll start this one day, but do we know any quiet rap artists?
There's some whisper rap out there that's you probably are happy they're whispering the lyrics too.
Good to know.
Oh my gosh. What a great intro for
I know.
our podcast.
We'll talk about some shit
so
one day.
So speaking of pineapple, how much should we be eating?
Great segue.
Well, since you're not eating, Brad, what are some questions, or like the main question you get around this maintenance thing from like either athletes? Do they feel like it's important? Is this a question you even get asked about? What are your feels about it?
Yeah, that's probably a very common question.
I mean, sometimes it's phrased right. How much should I be eating? Which is kind of exactly what Eric said, but continue.
Well, and sometimes it's the wrong question they're asking. You know, it's like, how much protein should I be eating? You know, how many carbohydrates should I have before and after training? You know, and that's to us that is a wrong question disguised as, well, how many calories should I be eating and how much should I be allotting to pre and post training and protein intake and et cetera, et cetera. So
Right.
I think a lot of those questions are masked. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get the impression that someone doesn't actually know what their total daily caloric intake it should be based on the questions they ask. Yeah, I think that's a very common one. And you can almost tell by the way they word it, because they're not like, so how much of my daily protein intake should I have distributed to my meals? Or, should I have a protein feeding after training, and does it matter, or can I just distribute it how I want? It's often exactly what Brad said, and you kind of get this niggling in the back of your mind that you don't know how much they're eating within a day, do they?
Yeah. Well,
Or even
and the
how
thing
much
is,
you eat.
yeah, and the bad part, or the obviously wrong part of the question is should, right? I mean, there's how much should I be eating of anything, but especially just calories in general implies that, again, that there is a right, and that's the problem in itself. That there is no,
Yeah.
it's not a
There's a singular
question to be
number.
answered. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I get that, because most people want an easy answer so they can move on with their training and life and all that stuff. And I think we try to provide the easiest answer that's still accurate. And that's where the rub is with maintenance. There's 1,000 relatively accurate calculators online where you can go in, plug in your goal, plug in your macronutrient breakdown preference, plug in your height, and inaccurately estimate your own activity level, and it will spit out calories for you. That would probably be right if you didn't inaccurately estimate your activity levels in 2/3 of the time. So it's like, I think most people don't like the answer they get of how to actually find maintenance, because it takes time. It's not something that they can go, right now I'm motivated to get on my nutrition plan, let me go figure it out. And I think they don't. They want to have something at their fingertips that they can start with. And I think that's where typically the problem is.
Yeah.
Well, and that's I think the key thing that you mentioned there is, what is your goal? Because a lot of times people will ask us, how much protein should I take in for weight loss? How many carbohydrates should I be taking in to gain weight? And so when people ask us, how many calories should I be taking in? It's like, well, what is your goal? If your goal is to gain weight, well, first let's figure out what calories are, instead of just assigning some random number that we know is a surplus. You know what I mean? If you want to lose weight, kind of the same thing. I mean, how many people way underestimate how many calories they should be taking in? Just today, I did a consultation with a guy that was typically in a deficit of 518 calories per day. You multiply that by 7 days, that's a good pound a week, right there, that he's going to be dropping. So, yeah, I think that's the key thing is identify your goal. What is your goal first? And then take your time taking things from there.
Yeah, and that goal needs, like you very obviously said, like, okay, an easy rule for us, 3,500 calorie rule, 500 deficit per day times a week, that's pound per week, and we're good. And I think people inherently get that, and that sounds easy enough of an answer for them, but they want to know from what. Like, so are we adding the 500 or taking away the 500 or whatever? What is that from? And that's what Eric was saying, like, people don't want to put the time into. And for us, typically, right, and then when we say the time, I think we could globally agree, like a 2-week period would be the minimum that we typically recommend as far as tracking calories at a certain amount, right? And so what we can do, or ways to do that, would be, I am using one of these calculators online, and it's just probably somewhere roundabout ballpark, but never going to be exact. And I'm going to follow it for 2 weeks and see what happens. Or a lot of times if we have an athlete that's a little more experienced and knows how to do this, and I think we do this with ourselves pretty often, we talk about it as coaches, we'll be like, I'm going to track for 2 weeks and actually it will tell me what my average is rather than the other way around, right? Enforcing a goal number. A lot of the times if someone's coming from never tracking at all, it's like, don't even worry about manipulating or aiming. You should really just see what happens. And most of the time, if you haven't been tracking for a long time, you're probably going to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. If you're taking someone who, let's say they understand the nutritional concepts, they have tracked, or rather they know how to track the macros, maybe they've kind of been in a permanent bulker, or they just kind of assessed it once or twice. I see there's like 3 valid ways of approaching this. One, you could just go on one of those sites and find the one that you think lines up with what you think is close to you, and then see what happens and adjust from there. Another one, just kind of a step in the right direction, is to select one knowing that it is a shot in the right ballpark but probably incorrect, and then carefully modify it over time. Look at the 7-day average from week 1, and if you dropped a bunch of water weight, that's probably a deficit, right? Like, oh, okay. And if you gained a bunch of weight real quick, that's probably a bigger surplus than you expected. But if it was kind of a middling number, like kind of in there, like, oh, okay, this is decently close to maintenance, and then you can keep fine-tuning from there. I think that's a reasonable approach. However, the best approach, in my opinion, is to actually take, like you said, a minimum of 2 weeks and track, because there are soft benefits to that I think most people undervalue. They look at it too quantitatively. They look at it as just, I need to figure out the number for me to then add or subtract from to get this down. But what often happens is you expose behaviors, and potentially, this is more so in general pop folks, you expose potential avenues for low-hanging fruit and success in which way you might want to go. So from the coach's perspective, if I have you track your food for 2 weeks and not modify anything, and you start losing weight, that means that just the act of being more aware of what you're eating modified your behavior. That means you're doing things like, yeah, I think they brought some donuts into work, and I had some. And some is actually like, yeah, most of the office is mad at me because they didn't get one because my ass was spending most of my time with the donut box, or just not realizing how often you snack or take things from other people, etc. I think all of these behaviors can be identified, and when you start paying attention to them, and that makes you lose weight, then we know that the focus of you should be more so a conscientiousness approach. However, if you change nothing and you're still gaining weight, then it's more of just an awareness or behavior change that needs to be focused on. Like, okay, I literally just need to make different choices in food that are less calorie dense and more filling, or just maybe not eat out as much, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you miss that if you just kind of take one of those first 2 approaches.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I like that. I like that term that you use, soft benefits. I've never heard that before, but I really like it. Because I think one thing that would be a soft benefit of just tracking is people, I think, underestimate how easy it is to just find calories of anything. They'll say, because I'll a lot of times ask for pre-start data. I'll say, just track your food. Don't have targets. Just look up what the calories are, log it, move on to your next day. And so then I always will get I don't want to call them excuses, but reasons why there's days that are missing, in their log. And usually it's something, well, we went out to eat and didn't know what the calories were and this and it's out there. It takes a little bit of effort, but it's out there. I mean, shoot, we've traveled across the world, the 5 of us, and I have found food on MyFitnessPal and other various websites that I didn't even know existed. Things like yuca in the Dominican Republic. I didn't even know what yuca existed, but sure enough, you can find the calories in yuca by just a little bit of effort, and looking it up. And I think that's another soft benefit, is finding out how easy it is to actually, assign some sort of a quantitative number for data gathering.
Yeah, and then when that's a common practice, right, which is, it could be, in my opinion, a strategic, useful thing to not track on days, like depending on where you are, if you're prepping, if you're off season, whatever, to like if your goal is weight loss and you're like, no matter what I do, it's not really happening, and I'm really on at least 5 days a week, sometimes 7, but that sixth or seventh day is because you went out to brunch, had your mimosas, and then stopped by at the bakery to have a couple of these, and you went to dinner with your friends with some margaritas and whatever, and it ends up being like a 4,000 calorie day for a female, which is not uncommon. It's really not, but if you are at 1,500 calories during the week, and you're like, I just don't report, or I don't feel like tracking on those weekend days, it's like, yeah, but you don't have to eat 1,500 calories to combat that all the time. Or like we talked about, it wasn't a case study Q&A. I don't think it was on the podcast, but how common that is. And so you think your maintenance is 15 and you have this like poverty number. So it's like, not really, if you're not including those big giant jumps, which again, in America, I could do that easily on a Saturday without trying or being uncomfortable. Like it's just easy to do here. And nothing's wrong with it. It's just, it can be huge misses if you're not putting that 2-week real time in without those excuses like Brad talked about. Like, I couldn't find it. It's like, you could probably estimate or guess or enter it one food at a time. Or
what's interesting to me about that is some of that is baked into the mentality that you have to allow yourself to have to enjoy days like that.
Yeah.
So when you think about, someone who's trying to eat healthy, change their lifestyle and diet, they've got to be on point. They've got to track. They've got to have some kind of system that's working. And then they often need a break, or they have a break, or maybe there's even some kind of structured break. But if there's not really, if that is left to the person's own devices, what often happens is they go, right, today's an off day from that. So I'm not going to be in that same mindset. I'm not going to be thinking about my food. So then when they then have to meet with their personal trainer on Monday after the weekend's over, and they try to go, okay, what did I have on the weekends? How much was it? They're not going to be accurate. They're going to forget things. They were specifically trying not to think about it. So they literally purposely hampered their ability to recall those foods because they didn't want it to be stressful. They wanted to be able to enjoy it. They wanted to have a break. And there's value on the psychological side of that. But we know from people's ability to just assess from recall and gauge caloric intake that can be an estimation of literally half of what you actually ate.
Yeah.
Sometimes even on average. So it's kind of this catch-22 where, okay, well, how do I get these breaks in, and how do I do that while actually not kind of screwing myself up? And I think that's a big reason why a lot of people, it's basically availability bias. They only can assess the calories they take in that they were paying attention to estimate what their maintenance calories are, but they're only paying attention when they're paying attention. So if you're not paying attention, then here we are, and that's why you think you maintain your body weight on 10 kcals per pound. So,
well, and it's such a tricky thing to go by satiety levels, like Andrea said, in America, right? Because a lot of times people will recall, well, you know what, I wasn't like overly stuffed that day, and yet I was satisfied, but my hunger levels weren't real high. And so that was probably a typical day. That was probably, a 1,600 calorie day. However, gosh, especially in this country, just eating to a point of not being hungry, especially when there's tasty foods involved, which a lot of times that's what people want when they have a break is tasty foods. And so, they've eating to just normal satiety levels. And because foods here are so calorie dense, because of the yummy way that we prepare food, you ate to just normal satiety levels and it was 3 or 4K, and like we said, you just in 2 days ate the same amount of calories as you almost did in the 5 days at your 15 to 1,600 calorie days, and so sometimes that's why just eating to satiety when you have a break, it's almost like you need to eat satiety eating your foods at home. Don't think about it, but just eat your normal foods at home, and then you're probably going to have a little bit of a closer, a closer amount of food that matches your calories. But it's so hard to eat to satiety, in this country, in my opinion, because you can have this much food and it's this many calories,
Yeah, but if you know your foods,
ton of calories.
Yeah, I mean, it's either way, right? Like you said, if I'm not really educated and I'm not paying attention, you're right, Brad. But if one of us was dieting and went out to eat once or twice a week, like, and not like contest prep dieting at the end of it, but like if like Eric's on a mini cut right now, like we could easily get a grilled chicken breast and a side salad and have like a baked potato. Like it's not a huge deal. It's just
I could also eat out and have a bunch of stuff that would lead to 3 and 4K and know how to adjust later in the week.
True.
But I think, these are both things that you're talking about are strategies that are behaviors and awareness levels you can get to, but that come at a cost, either of experience or when you're not experienced, having to force yourself to pay attention when you don't want to, or to track when you don't necessarily want to. And yeah, to kind of bring us full circle, I do think that is one of the reasons why more Gen Pop people just are not good at estimating their calories.
Yeah.
I see this a lot in just dudes too.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's just Gen Pop. I think it's a lot of people that just want to be like not contest prepping, dieting, but don't want to gain weight and just trying to be jacked in the off season. I feel like it happens a lot.
Well, I just recall back to, I've been lifting for 2 years and I'd never dieted before, and I'd been a skinny kid my whole life, and I had like bulked up pretty good, and I was like, I should do a cut, and I just guessed what I thought my calories should be, and I was way off the first time, and I would be considered like an intermediate lifter. Like I had benched 3 plates, I had deadlift 5, and I was almost squatting 4. Lifting for 2 years, someone had been serious at lifting for 2 years in most of the correct ways. So we would classify that person as an intermediate. Yet I just had no concept because of my life history I was just eating enough, making sure I got 200 grams of protein or more per day, basically. And by eating enough, I mean like way too much. So I didn't really, I just didn't really have a concept of when it came time. Like if I had put in an application with 3DMJ to consult with us, from the past to the future, we would have been like, oh no, you're way off on your numbers. We need to totally revamp. You're going to need to diet on lower calories than you think. So. Yeah.
And like Brad was saying, and like Eric kind of alluded to, that's typically our first step with incoming people. Whether you're coming on to do a Skype, which for us would just be like, hey, we're going to create a program with you together, both for nutrition and training, but we won't do that if we don't know what you've been doing. And what's funny too, and that we'll find a lot of time in terms of maintenance, calories, whatever, we have a questionnaire that says, do you know how much you're eating per day? Tell us in macros or calories, or if you need to, just give us a typical day of food. Most of the time, people will give us macros or calories because they're kind of aware that we kind of do that. And then we'll say, okay, great, we got your application. Here, I'd like you to record your nutrition for 2 weeks, or however long, leading up to our call, which might be in, again, 2 to 4 weeks or something like that. And then it's very common that when they've actually tracked it for those 2 weeks, because we asked them to, it's very different than what they initially put on their Skype application. And half the time they lose weight coming into the Skype because that's not actually what they were eating. And these are people that are pretty savvy, but it's super common, like you said, just tracking what it'll do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's some wanting to impress us too, maybe a little bit, but.
Well, and how many times do we see folks that actually do comply with what they put in their application? I typically eat X carbs, X fats, 2,200 calories a day, but they don't consistently weigh themselves. When they weigh themselves, it's once this week, they skip a week, once that week. And when they consistently weigh themselves and they actually are in compliance with what they put in their application, they're either A, losing weight, or B, gaining weight. And so then they have this light bulb experience of, oh my gosh, this target amount of calories that I had set for myself is actually a deficit, or it's actually a surplus,
I don't know what I think I know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Well, and then, okay, so let's talk about how the whole thing is a damn moving target anyways. Like, we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
We talk about it a lot, and we'll say, like, okay, well, 500 calories from maintenance is our typical dieting start for, but it's this figure that we obviously talk about a lot, and we use it in our coaching practice, but we know it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Eric, can you speak more about, I don't know, talk to me about that.
Yeah. Maintenance. Yeah, I think where it comes up most practically is when people they finish a diet and they expect to be able to go back to their off-season calories. And they don't realize that now that they've lost weight and also had some of the adaptive response to dieting, their maintenance calories are lower. And then not only that, once they go back to maintenance calories, they will start to go up again. So I think just being aware that, as your body weight changes, your energy expenditure changes because you're moving less body mass around. As your lifestyle changes, your activity levels are changing. And then so the first thing you go, okay, well, I need to get down with the math. Like, okay, if I can predict my body weight, if I can predict my energy expenditure at a given body weight, then okay, I'll know maintenance. It's like, well, it's not that simple either. Like, there's research where you look at people who have lost either 10% of their body weight or gained 10% of their body weight. And more consistently in those who have lost, you can predict that they'll be burning about 10 to 15% less than expected. And there's some pretty big standard deviations on that. Like if you take it all the way out to covering 95% of people, so you get kind of many of the outliers, you might be burning 2/3 of the calories you might expect. And those are the people who really struggle when they diet. Likewise, there's people like Alberto who they don't see that big drop, and the more they eat, the more their body is pumping out calories. And typically, what we think is in terms of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. So, I think one of the problems people have is they will take these calculators as kind of like a one-size-fits-all. And there's even research that will make you think that is the case. Like, hey, this study was, has like 90% reliability with predicting this group of 600 people's energy expenditure, within X amount of agreement at this body weight. Well, it's like, well, those weren't dieted or weight-gaining people. Those are people that's free living. And B, that is a high level of agreement at the group level. But there are going to be individuals who are the outliers. And those are the people who are typically going to need coaching. So we're seeing a lot of self-selected people who the calculators don't work for, or they would have never came to us. If they could have gone online, followed the calculator, done that program that somebody wrote for them and had great gains, they wouldn't be knocking on our door. So I think a lot of the times there's this perception of that's right for everybody. And it's like, no, that's a good estimation for a population, but that's never what matters for coaching or for you, for yourself. You only care about what works for you. And you could be that person 3 standard deviations from the mean. So, yeah, like if you compare, well, first, we'll use Berto because I think he's a good example. His numbers don't make sense for his body weight, period. Yeah. But then his numbers do make sense relative to themselves if you look at his off-season versus diet numbers.
Yeah.
Right? So if he has to bulk on 4,500 calories and deepest, darkest diet parts, he gets to just touching 3,000, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Some people don't make sense even relative to themselves. Like I can maintain
I think that's you, right?
My body weight. Exactly. I can maintain my body weight in the mid 3,000s or even higher 3,000s if I want to push over 220, which there's really no reason for me to do. But to effectively diet, I need to drop down almost to the lowest Berto gets relative to where he starts at the beginning of my diet. So for example, if I run a mini cut, I know that if I just drop 500 calories, I'll lose for about a week and a half, and then they'll start to peter out. So I actually have to mini cut on like making a 1,000 to 1,200 calorie drop to see consistent weight reductions. And I don't really feel that bad doing it, which is weird too. And then at the very, very hard end tail of the diet, I might have a difference of being at 1,800 calories versus mid 3,000s. So it's like a 50% reduction in my food intake to get shredded. While Berto, it's more like a 33% reduction. So there's a wide disparity there. So maintenance obviously is changing a lot for me. And it's not for Berto. However, he's starting at a much higher place unexpectedly based on his body weight.
Man.
Yeah, and how many people underestimate how well their bodies are at conserving energy? We've got these wonderful trackers now that track steps, right? And we can pretty much duplicate the same amount of steps that are walked every single day so that we're sure that we're keeping that expenditure the same every single day. 14,000 steps, 14,000 steps, 14,000 steps, 14,000 steps. It's a wonderful tool. but it really reveals how good our bodies are at conserving energy because, diet numbers stay the same, steps stay the same, yet weight loss gets halts. And it sometimes will halt for a long period of time. Well, why is that? Well, people, when we talk about the metabolism and how good your body is at conserving energy and suppressing metabolism, you think about the energy burned taking in 20 respirations a minute versus 14, that's 7 respirations that your body is conserved that you didn't even know it was doing, that is turning over calories. Yeah. All right, I guess I can't math, but okay, yeah, 6 respirations per minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. That's a lot of calories that are no longer being burned. Your body's just slowed down those respirations, heart rate, your body will slow the heart rate down a little bit. Instead of 80 beats a minute, it'll slow down to 70,
Slows down a lot in the prep.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I remember I used to be around 35 to 38 resting heart rate.
It's scary.
Eric almost died, y'all.
Yeah. And so we think about all of those things that burn calories. You think about the peristalsis of your intestine, of how much that intestine is moving, right? It will go from just trickling along, I don't know, we could just assign a rate of a foot of peristalsis per minute, right? It slows down to like 2 inches.
No poops.
A minute.
Well, it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for people who are not even constipated to go from, I would say, maybe 3 bowel movements a day to 1 at a certain stage in prep.
I'd be lucky. I was going to say, I'd be lucky to poop every 3 days at the end of prep.
Yeah, well, you're a bit on the
but that's not uncommon for a smaller
at
human.
The end of prep, yeah.
For someone to have 1 bowel movement every 2 or 3 days, and so if you think about all of that
basically
that's
when
all.
You
yeah,
and then when I refeed, it'd be like 3 in a day, and I'm like, wow, this is great.
Yeah,
finally give those intestines some fuel to A, work, and then B, something to actually move.
Exactly. But that's my point being, that's hundreds of calories a day that your body is now shutting down, and adding to the moving target. You could be the same body weight at 2 very different times, and your maintenance calories be different at those 2 different times, just depending on the context of what is happening in your life.
Yeah, and let's not forget muscle mass too. Like, I remember when I first started lifting, again, I cheered, so I have like some muscle in my body, but I would be like, well, I weigh about the same as Ava Cowan, so why don't I look like her eating that same amount? Mm-hmm. She was, she's been lifting for like 10 years, all jacked and stuff.
Muscle mass
changes over the long run will definitely impact your energy expenditure. There's a lot of things that go into it, and interesting stuff that never adds up with cardio when you get to high levels. Like your activity levels will track with your energy expenditure to a point, and then other stuff seems to reduce, and you kind of get this curvilinear like taper off as you do more cardio.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
because you get good at it. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. And your body gets good.
Well, that's part of it, but for the most part, this whole new evidence of a constrained model of energy expenditure seems to indicate that it's more like other components of total daily energy expenditure get ramped down in proportion to when you go from like high to very high levels of activity. And the data to back that up is I think we've talked about this before. Hunter-gatherer societies don't have much higher levels of energy expenditure compared to our sedentary society, which is pretty crazy. Despite the fact that they're like 4 to 5 times as active. So that means other stuff in them has to be relatively suppressed. Mm-hmm. Which is probably part of the reason why they're alive. And part of that's also because we're all a little elevated from being overeating, than what you'd expect compared to our activity levels. So we're it kind of just goes to show you there that the body is pretty good at adapting to that stuff. Not to say that it can't be overwhelmed or overcome, especially in the short term, but your maintenance calories are definitely a moving target, and you're going to have a different maintenance number, even if you keep, let's say, energy expenditure. Let's say you keep your lifestyle fixed to make it more accurate. You're going to have a different daily energy expenditure, different maintenance calorie intake level at every different body weight, and whether that body weight is in a surplus state or a dieted state.
Yeah.
in most people. And that might be a broad range for someone like me, for example, or a tight range for someone like Berto, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of times when we do write programs for folks, you know, I almost always have to give them the caveat. Okay, all of this analysis that we're doing right now is done under your current lifestyle. You know, so if you either A, went from where you are now to like a landscaper, all of this is null and void because it's going to be dramatically different. Or likewise, if you're currently a landscaper and we've collected this data with you doing your landscaping work and you get an office job, again, dramatic difference. All this is null and void. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when we do those things that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, where you're collecting data, tracking for 2 weeks. If life changes for whatever reason, you know, your numbers are going to be affected, and then the accuracy of your data collection is going to be either, you know, more or less accurate. And sometimes it's just a brief time period. You know, like I just talked to a client today who, you know, was tracking along real good, and he had to move. And so he's moving all of his furniture and he's moving everything, and he's got a lot of NEAT, you know, non-exercise activity that's gone up through just movement. And so he started dropping weight, you know, eating the same amount of calories that he, you know, would normally, you know, maintain on. That's, you know, we just kind of let that kind of come out in the wash, because once he returns to his normal, you know, life, weight will come back up, you know, and the gains will start happening again.
Yeah. And it's funny too how quickly it can change. So like we say, the body adapts. So like the first week I started functional fitness, I ate probably over 3,000 calories a day for the first time in my life for like a week and a half and didn't gain weight. You know, and then eventually weight would start creeping on, and then I like settled back at my normal body weight. But it was like, you know, like you can shock yourself either way. And then when I had the flu, I wasn't hungry at all. I think I ate maybe 1,000 calories a day for like 3 days and lost like all this, but because water weight, because I wasn't training or whatever. So it's like, yes, it's a tool for us. And like Brad said, and like some of the instances I just said, or when dieting or mini cutting or whatever, you'll never know it and you'll never figure it out, but we're just observing trends for you as the person, because, you know, like Eric's not going to magically be able to hold weight at 4K like Berto does. Like we know that, even though within Eric, his maintenance might change.
I can hold a weight at 4K.
I can hold mild obesity at...
And it might be 230 pounds.
But you know, people would be like, well, why do we even try? Like, what's even the point? And they're kind of right, you know, in a way, as far as like, it's just a starting point, and it's just a snippet. And it's one of those things that's like shit to hear, but because you'll never know it, you're forever chasing it, I guess. But, and then eventually get to a point where you realize, like, I don't need to chase this because it doesn't matter that much for my long-term progress as an athlete all the time.
Absolutely. And I think it's, go for it, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, why track, why watch it, why quantify it? I think you kind of answered that, Andrea, because look how much you've learned just with the little bit of tracking that you've done. There is so much to be learned about you and about how you're tick by just paying attention, just paying a little bit of attention. You learned that 3,000 calories a day is not unheard of for you to, you know, maintain your weight at that lifestyle, and you can always go back.
It was only for a little bit though. Actually, for the most of those 2 years I was doing the functional fitness, it was more like a 23 to 2,800, depending on the day.
There's a really interesting thing that happens with activity.
Go ahead, Eric. Interesting thing that happens with activity.
Yeah, so, and I wrote about this in monthly applications of Strength Board recently. There was so we're basically built to be more active. That's why you look at these hunter-gatherer societies, which, depending on what timeline you think is actually accurate, it's at least 100,000 years of our history, if not longer, that we were like that, versus since the agricultural age even allowed a sedentary lifestyle. So we're built, if you will, to be more active than we are today. And this shows up in our normal steady state energy regulation when you're not tracking stuff. So as you do more stuff, you get hungry. Like the more active you are, the more hungry you get. That makes sense, right? But what doesn't make sense is that when you start to go to the extreme low end of that, it goes away. Mm-hmm. So when you're inactive, your satiety regulation gets jacked up. Also, interestingly, is that as you get more and more active, the satiety response to a meal becomes more fine-tuned. Like, yes, you'll be more hungry, but after you're done eating the right amount of food, you will become full more consistently. Mm-hmm. So basically, what this shows us that when you're appropriately active for a human being, which is a lot more active than most humans are in the Western world, that is when you can rely on satiety more reliably. Yeah. Which is, I understand the silliness of my word choice there, but and obviously that does interact with the fact, like Brad was talking about, the food in the States is designed to make you want to eat more and not make you feel full. But eating, let's say, I can't believe I'm going to say this, relatively unprocessed foods in their natural state, and being highly active, most people are going to be able to regulate and maintain a body weight and just have their calories just go up. And what you probably experienced, Andrea, was that initial increase in hunger before that fine-tuning had occurred. Mm-hmm. And then it started to get fine-tuned, and you stabilized. Yeah. So I think that's important to recognize that, like we say, what isn't measured isn't managed, or that if you aren't assessing, you're guessing. Like, that's true, but at the same time, your body does have a way to make sure that you eat and that you match your food intake to your energy expenditure. It's just much more difficult to have that match up nicely in a modern society. Like, it's not like I think I've talked about this many times. When you just have a resistance training study occur and you don't manipulate someone's nutrition, everybody either gains weight or they gain muscle mass and they see a drop in body fat. Like, you're going to figure out a way to feed the process that needs to happen. And once you're more experienced in this and you have quantified it like you guys have, that's when you can start getting away from quantifying it. Like, I'm 2.5 or almost 2.5 weeks deep into a mini cut, and I have not logged a single day or tracked anything. I'm weighing things, and I've changed my behavior, and I know what my rough calorie intake is, and I have a system. I know how much basically what's not being eaten compared to what was eaten, and I've lost 4 pounds. Mm-hmm. But and I didn't track at all for the last 4 years, except when I was part of a study for gaining weight. To ensure that I was in a surplus, I just looked at whether or not I was gaining weight at an appropriate rate. So you can start looking at the output and paying less attention to the fine details at a certain stage. Not for all goals. Obviously, I wouldn't contest prep this way. But I think maybe it's comforting people to know that going through a period of tracking, which I definitely did for 5 years straight of macro tracking and weighing, not that you have to do that, but even for months, is incredibly informative and then can lead to the future where you might not have to be tracking for the kind of goals you might have.
Yeah.
You get all those soft benefits.
Yes, you love it.
I love that word. I love that term. I'm going to use that term a lot.
He's going to talk to his wife about them soft benefits tonight.
She's like, no, I need the hard benefits, Brad.
Yeah. I was going to say that, but Eric, you just...
leave it to Helms to be a 12-year-old on our podcast at all times. I like that.
Solid 13-year-old.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a solid 14-year-old there.
Tell them about how you told us in your meeting and how you started your mini cut, Eric. For an example.
Yeah, so this is fun. So, we have what's called in New Zealand My Food Bag, which is there's tons of these around in the States, but it's basically you select one of the various menus that they want, and they deliver the groceries to you and recipes. Mm-hmm. And this was something we did because we found we had fallen to a pattern of eating out all the time, which is A, a waste of money, and then B, I wasn't very confident that my micronutrient density was there, and then C, really useful for me who was trying to actually gain weight, not so useful for my wife who was trying not to gain weight. So we did this, and since we're both very busy and it saves us time, it's a really convenient way. So we get a box of fruit and we get 4 dinners that are the ingredients for it. Now, what we would do before was that those other 3 nights of the week, we would go eat out. And then we would probably get brunch or lunch, either or, almost every day, eating out. So we were eating out an incredible amount. So all I did was, all right, for this next month, I'm just not going to eat out. And all I'm going to do is get eggs and egg whites, tuna packets, and Greek yogurt and fruit. And, well, I didn't even get any fruit because we already got a bunch of fruit. We get like enough fruit to eat 3 pieces a day each from my food bag. And I calculated what the total calorie amount was based on the average amount in the dinners and what was in the fruit and the Greek yogurt and all that stuff. And it puts me right just over 2,000 calories. And I was like, that's perfect. So on the days I eat dinner, it'll be mid-2000s. On the days I don't eat dinner, it'll be like right at 2,000. Mm-hmm. And that's money for me for trying to go from 220 to whatever that puts me at. And I haven't tracked anything. I just tried to increase my protein intake a little bit. So, and it's been very, very effective. I think I weighed in this morning at 98 kilos, and I started the diet at just a little over 100.
All right.
So it's like 4.5 pounds of loss in 2 weeks thus far.
Yeah, but that's a really good example of you didn't take 2 weeks to initially calculate maintenance, nor did you use a calculator. You kind of have some idea of what you typically lose on. You maybe used a calculator once to get that initial, this is approximately, if I instill these behaviors, this is about where I'm at. So let's do this for a while and see what happens.
And I started doing some lightweight Olympic lifting on my off days to bump the expenditure up just a touch. So yeah.
But how could you do that if you don't know the exact number of calories you're burning, Eric? How can you?
I'm actually not losing weight because I didn't track. Like, if you don't track, physics doesn't work.
Yeah. Similar to that too, like, because for people who want to make their deficit at 500, people that want that magic, like if I'm on the elliptical for, say, 30 minutes, my pre-core elliptical under my feet with my body weight entered in it will tell me I burn like 350 to 400 calories, but my Fitbit on my watch will tell me it was like 250 to 300, and therefore what do I use? You know what I'm saying? So
they're both wrong.
Right. So what I'm trying to all the people that want to find this, it's like it really, no matter how you want to track it, it's not going to be right. Mm. And if it is right for a day, it won't be tomorrow. I don't know, but at the same time, we use it all the time, right? It's because what are we going to do, right? We need a place to start.
Well, it's the difference between validity and reliability, and we really, in a practical sense, only care about reliability unless the validity is way off. So, just for the listeners to clarify the difference, validity is how well something represents something. So unless you were to actually take all the food you ate for the day and put it in a bomb calorimeter to actually get its actual intake, and then live in a metabolic ward to actually get your expenditure, you don't have the direct measurement. All you have is MyFitnessPal, the labels, and what Clean Eater 64 put in as the values for that food, right?
I need to look and see if that's a real person. MyFitnessPal, but keep going.
I guarantee you that's a real person. There's 63 people who he's mad at for choosing the name before him. But he's not nearly as mad as Clean Eater 643. He was pretty pissed about it too.
Yeah.
And on the expenditure side of it, like you said, you got a Fitbit, or you've got online tables, or you've got your polar heart rate monitor, which is probably the more accurate out of those three, or you've got your which is coming up in another episode of Mass, written by our guest author, who talks about the reliability of the Fitbit tracking sensors. Check it out in Mass.
I will. 3dmusclejourney.com/Mass. Okay.
Yeah, it's coming up in April. So anyway, you can't know your true expenditure or your true intake, but you can track them the same way and eat a similar broad range of foods and have similar levels of activity. And then it doesn't matter if you're 10 or even 20% off, because when you need to make a change, if you're not gaining weight or if you're not losing weight, you would make the same relative change. And like this comes up a lot of the time when people, like people in the UK and Europe are often like, oh, I don't track my fiber. It's not listed differently, versus the US where the fiber is listed as a carbohydrate. And it's not that everyone in Europe is actually eating less carbs. They make the same adjustments. It's just they're not counting some of them. It doesn't make a difference, So whether or not you, like for example, I do think you should probably track everything you eat. that has calories, regardless if it's a low amount. Because if you add up all of the artificial sweeteners or low-cal stuff that you have that does have some calorie intake, if you add up your fruits, if you add up your vegetables, if you add up the creamer you put in your coffee, that can all add up to, depending on how much you're taking in, maybe up to 100 calories, on the high end, which matters. But if you don't track it, but you consistently use the same amount, it doesn't matter, because when you hit a stall, you're still going to drop the same amount as you would if you were tracking it. So I think that's the issue. It's very important to be reliable, not that important that it's valid unless you're way off. Like if you think you're taking in, 1 gram per pound of protein, but you're actually taking in 0.6 grams per pound of protein, that'd be a problem. Yeah. But so long as you're in the right ballpark, then you're probably fine, and it's just about being reliable.
Yeah, and it's amazing how those little things add up, because I know that I remember my ketchup intake was going up dramatically, when I was doing my very early stages of my 2015 guest posing diet, Mm-hmm. It was very reliable. It was just always just a circle, on my turkey burger, and then pretty soon it turned into 2 circles, on my turkey burger. And then pretty soon it turned into circles on my turkey burger and then a little bit on the plate, and then pretty soon it, and that's not reliable, And unless I am tracking
ketchup started multiplying and having children.
But you can just imagine, unless I'm accurately weighing that ketchup every single time that I am putting it on there, it's no longer reliable. It's going up, each and every month that I am using more and more ketchup.
Yeah. But like Eric said, if you're like, every time I'm dieting, I'm the queen of like seasonings and sauces and Walden Farms and Splendas and whatever. But it is, I never tracked it. And like clients will ask us, like, do I need to track my gum? Do I need to track my sweetener? Do I need to track my whatever? And like personally, I never did, because I turned into a prep robot and I eat the same thing every day because I find that to be much easier to prep. So it's like if every day this multivitamin might be a carb, but I take the same one every day at the same time. These fish oils might be 3 grams of fat, but I take the same. So from the get-go, like Berto and I had the last time had this conversation. I'm like, I take these supplements every day at these times. He's like, well, if you take it every day and you take it every day, then we don't have to include it. Just keep taking it the whole prep.
Yep.
And that's just another one of those, like, maybe it was an extra 50 calories a day, but if it was never in there and it never makes its way in there, but it never goes away, then it's like fine. Whereas if I started taking, I don't know, because people do crazy things in prep. Like, what if I took 3 multis because they're delicious, because they're Flintstones? And what if I ended up drinking 5 cups of coffee with Splenda instead of 2? Or what if I had 3 servings of sugar-free ketchup instead of the Walden Farms, which is like vinegar-based? Then that would be an extra like 30 calories. So like you're saying, it's
and that's very common.
Yeah. People I get very robotic, and I know like there's these things. Because of my OCD, I luckily don't have to track. But most people, like Brandon, couldn't do that. He's one of those, which I think y'all are too. I think Jeff's more like me, but Brandon's one of those, like Berto, where my fitness pals through the day as he eats things. And me, I'm like, before I go to bed, I know everything I'm eating tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so I think depending on the type of dieter you are, those things can matter more.
Yeah, well, and that's go for it, Brad.
Well, I was going to say that's the peace of mind of having the meal plan, right? Because I know my first prep, I followed a meal plan, and as I reduced the quantity of my food, it was very accurate. I went from, a full envelope of a meal replacement to half of an envelope, and I would weigh it out, and that's exactly 175 calories that I'd be reducing from one week to the next. Mm-hmm. And so that's why a lot of times meal plans are super, super effective, because it is very, very accurate, and it is very, very, when you make changes, it's a pretty obvious change, and I know myself, I was very resistant to using a flexible approach at first, just because I didn't have that peace of mind, of knowing, okay, from yesterday to today, it's the same amount of calories. It's different foods. It can't be the same, amount of calories. And yeah, it was hard for me especially during the competition diet, to let go of my meal plan.
Well, it's funny, like the culture of the If It Fits Your Macros kind of crew that grew out of the mid 2000s versus the culture of bodybuilding prior to that, where you'd have a structure. Um, there are really valuable things that both focus on, but because they were seen as like enemies, they would discount almost everything the other group did. So like a really common thing you'll see, or you would see in a young If It Fits Your Macros adherent, who also tends to be following all the guys who tell you that you don't have to worry about artificial sweeteners and that you can eat whatever you want, it's this perfect storm of they don't have structure. They're not at all worrying about what is satiating or not, and then they have an unlimited amount of calorie-free foods, and it results in these crazy cravings, these wild weigh-in spikes because they're not paying attention, like the sodium, jacked up sleep schedules, which then further jacks up their satiety, and it's like, instead of just going, hey, like obviously your meal plan approach works, you systematically reduce food intake, and you're ensuring that you're consuming mostly satiating foods, and you've covered a lot of micronutrient bases, and you have a consistent meal schedule, and it's easy to adjust and modify. But it doesn't really allow you to travel, and sometimes you're actually cutting your protein down. You're not meaning to, because you're just looking at peanut butter as fat, not the fact that it has protein in it, and other things like that. Instead of just identifying the few weaknesses and saying, hey, we can make this better, they go, everything about these guys is stupid. Like this IFBB pro with 15 years of experience as a bodybuilder who gets shredded is doing it wrong. And therefore, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and just randomly fit shit into my diet, and it'll be perfect for when I prep. And then they have a really, really rough time. Yeah. So it's like, and the clean eating side of it, has their similar opposing versions of that. They don't see the value in what If It Fits Your Macros people are doing. But yeah, flexible doesn't mean without structure, and I think that's the biggest misnomer. Like if you are following an If It Fits Your Macros driven approach, great, we do that too. But have structure, eat largely foods that don't make you hungrier when you eat them, and make it so that it's easy to ensure you're having consistent reductions or changes in whether you're bulking or cutting, because that's kind of lost. And those are many of the strengths of having, like Brad said, a meal plan. He knows exactly what he's reducing when he goes from eating 2 apples to 1 apple, or whatever the version of that might look like.
Yeah.
And I think that's a piece that is just not very much talked about in the If It Fits Your Macros crowd. That is critically important.
What's funny too is when I think about it a different way, as opposed to like maintenance calories and how much should I be eating. Like I said, if it's like, all right, I'm starting prep tomorrow, these are my foods, I'm going to start there. And like you said, that doesn't mean I never change it. Like, because I'm savvy enough, I know, like, okay, say for instance, it's going to be 1,800 calories, and I have this meal plan that is 1,800 calories, and maybe nothing happens. I don't know. I'm just saying, maybe nothing happens. Then I could be like, oh, this is my maintenance intake. You know what I mean? Versus like this maintenance number. It's like, these are my maintenance foods. And like Brad said, if meal 2 and 4 had 5 ounces of chicken in them, and I make that 3.5 ounces each, but I'm still getting 1 gram per pound, I could start losing. Like, it's all just like mental concepts. Like we had, like you said, the mental calorie burn of a Fitbit versus whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter if you want to use your Fitbit or the Precor equation. But if you're changing back and forth, it's a problem. But it's like, and neither, like you said, neither of them are right. And like with the meal plan, I could exchange every bit of those 1,800 calories for completely different foods and still get 1,800 calories. But it doesn't freaking matter. One might actually be 17 something, one might be 19 something. So if I changed every other day, wouldn't matter. But if I did 2 weeks here and I maintained weight, I changed to the other, what I thought was 1,800 calories, and actually lose weight, then I'd find out that they're actually not all the same. But like, so it's like we, in this sport, and we do the best we can with these mental constructs to give us aims but because it is the body, like we literally never know. Right? I mean,
Well, and that's where you've taken out that's where you've taken out that reliability, because not only do we have this moving target for the way the body responds, but then just behaviors and how you're tracking things can skew things as well. One thing I learned was that 2,500 calories by my meal plan was not 2,500 calories using a more flexible approach. If I could maintain at 2,500 calories using my meal plan, that was very predictable. But then when I would hit 2,500 calories using a more flexible approach, what happens? I end up gaining weight. Well, it's because I'm not taking in 2,500 calories. I'm taking in 2,500 calories on paper, by the numbers. But, I'm no longer reliable. I'm no longer using the same system. So now it's kind of like you have to start over again. You have to say, okay, well, now with this system, I have to say, okay, well, 2,500 calories is actually 27, 28, 29, whatever. And then you have to kind of start over and kind of redo your reliability in there.
Well, right. And there's like strict meal plan versus like I have these pillars of similar foods I eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the level of variability that you have in the way you eat can result in different things. So like if you like another type of diet that we talked about is people who like mix it up every day, or people who are very, very structured. A lot of other people, and I'm kind of like this, will go through a phase of eating this thing. Mm-hmm. And I remember, God, I can't remember what the name of the food was. I think it was 2009, but they had these, it's either Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, I can't remember, but they were like these Greek phyllo dough pastry things with stuff with like spinach or other like potatoes or something like that, and they had the macros on there. Mm-hmm. And I was taking that as gospel. And in the back of my head, and even Berto said it, he was like, I really don't think the macros are that low, man. That tastes a little too good. It's a pastry. Like, how are they doing that without that much fat? And I was like, I don't know, bro. It's fish macros, kind of thing. And I think for like that 4-week period, part of the stall might have been for the fact that was like a daily consumption thing. And if that's off by a large amount, that can become a systematic error. Versus a just something that gets averaged out because you eat it on Wednesday, Yeah. So it's some of those things which is what Brad's talking about. When you have a meal plan, which could be incorrect when it was first written, mm-hmm. Or it could be right, that's always going to be the same. But when you're switching up foods daily, depending on where you trend without the structure of a meal plan from the types of foods you eat, that can be very different. And another thing you'll notice is that I've often seen people who follow a meal plan when they switch to if it fits your macros or flexible diet approach, initially gain weight and they freak out. And it's typically because they go from whole foods to more processed foods and their sodium level jumps up. Mm-hmm. And they just don't even think about that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can affect it that you may not be realizing, that you're just not even tracking or paying attention to.
That's how those fear-based things happen too. Like again, the fear of sodium, the fear of processed food is because you never do it. That always blows my mind. Like how people give themselves food intolerances and then are like, that food's the devil. And I'm like, it's because you never eat it. But never mind. Mm-hmm. It's another.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother for another day. Whole nother rant from my recliner of rage another time. Okay, so for
Gosh, I just had something I was going to say that was important, and I can't remember what it was.
Brad, figure it out.
Hopefully, I'll think of it very quickly.
Sodium. It was sodium.
Yes, that was what it was. Thank you, Andrea. You are a rock star. So yes, changes in weight, right? When we pull out this food and we start eating more sodium, how many people think that food is the devil because of what it did to their weight? They were 142 yesterday, and now here the next day I'm 144 and a half. And, a lot of times, that is a scary thing to see, but you just, I think it was Eric one time, we were co-coaching somebody, and Eric put it so perfectly. He's like, if you think about it logically, is there any way with a miracle on your side that your body was able to synthesize 2.5 pounds of mass overnight? That food is not the devil, and what really leads to us in the way we do business as far as averaging out your body weight over 7 days, and throwing out random outliers, after the days that you do have, a high sodium meal or whatever that, could have affected things. And that's why it's important, in my opinion, to have a good amount of data where we do require at least 2 weeks, so that we can kind of let all of those random outliers kind of come out in the wash. And, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, maintenance calories. If we were to wrap it up, we use it as a reference, but it is made up, and we'll never know it.
Mm-hmm. And is always changing.
And
you have to have a lot of awareness, just a lot of awareness of a lot of context too. I mean, that's really kind of the bottom line, is having all of that context and all those soft benefits of tracking all those different periods of time and all those different body weights and all those different states.
Yep. There's something to be gained from determining your maintenance, even though it'll change. And that is, like Brad said, the soft benefits of learning to track, seeing how not necessarily reliable it is and how it might change over time, and also developing awareness of what you do so you can see, oh, maybe this is easy. I just need to pay more attention to what I'm doing or have consistent meal times because I just eat unconsciously and I wasn't even aware of that. Or, okay, I need to choose foods that perhaps are a little more satiating, and then I can kind of be in a steady state and maintain weight. But if your goal is to gain weight or lose weight, I would definitely go through a period where you do figure out your current maintenance, which the best way to do it, gold standard, is to track for at least 2 weeks, if not longer, up to 4 maybe, especially if you're a female who has a menstrual cycle, and look at the relationship to the calories you eat and the change in body weight, which will inform you probably where the range of your maintenance is, and then you can adjust from there. And then if you're looking to get a little faster of a start and kind of have to change on the fly, then you can use one of these calculators online. Just know that it's not right. Probably is a good guess. It's not perfectly right, and then you can pay attention while following that guideline and then make adjustments as needed to reach your target rates of weight loss or gain.
Boom shakalaka.
Yeah, and then the two big numbers that you need to have over time is calories, or at least a mean daily average of calories, and body weight.
Yep.
You got to kind of compare those two things. You can't really have one and not the other. You have to be able to compare those two very important numbers.
You can't have one without the other.
That's beautiful, guys. Thanks.
However, at a certain point.
Oh.
Did you already stop recording?
No, you go ahead. I was going to.
Okay. At a certain point, if you've ingrained the habits of having a good macronutrient spread, you can go through periods where they're not extreme related goals, like a mini cut or just a gaining phase, and not track your intake. Just knowing that you are hitting within reasonable ranges for the macros, and you're seeing the scale weight do what it should over time. That's absolutely fine.
Over time. Don't have to weigh in every day. At some point in your life.
Some point.
Okay. Can I?
Go for it.
Okay, see you later.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.